Have you ever noticed how weeks of pressure can leave you feeling wired at night, foggy in the morning, and detached from things that used to bring you joy? And you start wondering, has my brain shifted into survival mode? A few months ago, a client came to me and said something that really stayed with me. They said, I don't recognize myself. This was a capable person, a high performing business owner. The business looked successful on the outside, revenue was up, and the team was growing. But internally, they were running on fumes. They were waking up exhausted even after sleeping at nighttime. They were forgetting things mid task, and they were more reactive, more blunt, less patient than they'd ever been before. They described feeling flat, like the color had been drained out of them. Not dramatic, just dull. And they thought it meant something about them, a lack of resilience, a lack of discipline, a personal failing. What I want to show you today is that this experience is often not a character problem. It is a physiological problem. And when you start to understand what chronic stress does to the brain, it becomes easier to shift out of survival mode and back into clarity. Welcome to the Think Tank podcast. I'm Maria Van Vuklis, founder of The Conscious CEO. This is the space where we think clearly about what drives performance, leadership, and sustainable success. It's not about a good strategy on paper, but the inner mechanics of what determines how you show up under pressure. My work sits at the intersection of psychology, health, and leadership performance. I also have a background in naturopathy as a qualified practitioner, which is why I naturally look at chronic stress through a lens of physiology and how it impacts the brain, hormones, inflammation, energy, and behavior. In this episode, we're covering what chronic stress does to the brain, why it can narrow thinking and flatten motivation, how it shows up in leadership and business culture, and practical resets that rebuild capacity without adding more to your plate. This episode is for educational purposes and not medical advice. Let's go back to my client and let's call him Jordan. Jordan wasn't new to pressure. He had handled launches, cash flow, stress, staffing issues, high stake negotiations, all of that under pressure. He was competent under the heat. But this time was a bit different because it was a single event. It was weeks turning into months of constant decision making, constant output, shorter sleep patterns, more urgency, and less recovery. Jordan kept saying, once I get through this quarter, I'll just slow down. I'll have a break. But chronic stress doesn't wait for a quieter calendar. It accumulates and it leaves biological footprints. When stress becomes chronic, your stress response systems are activated repeatedly without enough downshift and recovery. Over time, this alters how the brain allocates resources. It becomes more threatened and more threat orientated and less capacity orientated. This is one reason why people can feel like their brain is failing them when it actually is happening. It's just an adaptation to prolonged pressure. And here's the important point for leaders. Stress doesn't change how you feel. It changes how you think. So this is the part that explains Jordan's experience more clearly. The prefrontal cortex is heavily involved in decision making, planning, impulse control, emotional regulation, perspective taking, prioritizing long-term out tasks over short-term relief. It's also one of the biggest brain regions that is highly sensitive to stress signaling. Under stress, the brain can shift away from the nuanced, thoughtful, top-down control that the prefrontal cortex supports. That's when people notice difficulties in focusing, reduced cognitive flexibility, more black and white thinking, a lower threshold for frustration, and reduced capacity to hold complexity. Jordan describes it like this: I can only deal with what's right in front of me right now. Anything strategic feels impossible. That is not laziness. That is not a mindset gap. That is often a capacity issue. When the prefrontal cortex is compromised under stress, leadership becomes more effortful. You work harder to get less clarity, and you need more time to make decisions you normally make really quickly. You feel really overwhelmed by tasks that are objectively manageable. And this is where high performing leaders start to panic because they are so used to being so sharp. But the nervous system is not a machine. It's not a machine you can override indefinitely. Jordan also said, I'm not sad. I'm just flat. This is a common experience under chronic stress. Chronic stress can contribute to a depression like pattern in behavior, including reduced interest and pleasure, withdrawal symptoms, reduced motivation, low energy, irritability, and decreased movement and engagement. There are multiple pathways that can contribute to this, but one that is often discussed in research is the inflammatory signaling, including neuroinflammation, which is influenced by mood and motivation. The most important takeaway is not that one mechanism explains everything. The takeaway is that chronic stress can change brain chemistry and brain function in a way that feels like you become a different person. Jordan kept asking, is that just who I am? And my response was no. Your system is responding to chronic pressure. That means it can only respond when pressure reduces and recovery returns. This reframes the entire experience from shame to strategy. Jordan started forgetting words mid-sentence. They were rereading emails 3 times a day. They would walk into a room and forget where they came from, what they're there for. And this can happen under chronic stress. Stress can influence memory systems in ways that reduce flexible recall and increase more rigidness, habit-based responding. It can also make it harder to retrieve information under pressure, even if you know the information. So in business, this doesn't just feel annoying, it creates real consequences. For example, you lose confidence in your thinking. You procrastinate on decisions because your brain feels unreliable or foggy. You become more controlling because uncertainty feels intolerable. You avoid complex conversations because you don't trust your capacity to navigate them calmly. Jordan said something that is very honest and very common. I'm making decisions just to make the discomfort stop. That is a stress response, not a leadership strategy. Now, let's talk about business implications. Chronic stress is not only a well-being issue, it is also a leadership performance issue. Because when leaders are under chronic stress, what you'll find is that their decision quality drops significantly, patience drops, their cognitive functioning and flexibility drops significantly, and the capacity to regulate one's emotions significantly just drops. Communication amongst others becomes sharp, blunt, and reactive, and tolerance for complexity also narrows. And here is the piece that many leaders miss. Stress does not stay contained inside the leader. Leaders set the emotional weather of the business. You see, when Jordan was constantly activated, the business started mirroring this. The team became more cautious, people stopped bringing issues to him early, and communication became more reactive amongst the team, not only just with Jordan. There was more second guessing, more defensiveness, and more urgency. Everyone was on edge, not because the team was dysfunctional, but because the nervous system climate of the business had shifted and not shifted in a good direction. This is why conscious leadership starts within. Because if you are a leader, your physiology becomes part of the operating system of your business. That might be uncomfortable to hear, but it's also empowering because it puts you in a position to be in charge of how you want to direct your business and the inner landscape of your business. Because it means that there is a lever that you can pull that most people overlook. You can rebuild capacity and your business will feel it. So at this point, people often ask, what is happening? What makes me feel wide and tired all the time? There are a few important concepts here, and I'd like to keep this as practical as I can. You see, your brain has a calming pathway that helps you shift out of vigilance into rest. And one of the key calming systems involved in this is called GABA signaling, which plays a central role in quietening neural activity and supporting sleep quality and emotional steadiness. When stress is chronic, the brain becomes more vigilant and more reactive, which often shows up as rumination, difficulty winding down, lighter sleep patterns, waking tired, a lower threshold for overwhelm. This is why sleep and downshifting rules are not just nice extras to have. They are the training of the nervous system. They teach your body that it is safe enough to recover and to recover in what restores leadership capacity. All right, so what did we actually do with Jordan? Because the last thing a high performing business owner needs is a longer to do list labeled self care. It's just unrealistic. So I didn't want to add more. I wanted to just simplify things, and that's exactly what I did. I focused on a few small levers that could bring Jordan's nervous system back down from constant alert and give his brain a chance to come back online. And the way that this was done was by 3 moments in the day where you could reset your system for just 1 minute, not 10 minutes, not a meditation session, just 1 minute. And it looks like this, as simple as just slow breathing for 60 seconds. And also stepping outside if you can. If you can do this slow breathing outside, even better. And you just get a dose of sunlight, air, fresh air, just for 60 seconds. And also adding a simple body cue, such as like unclenching your jaw or dropping your shoulders or even softening your belly, can actually create significant change. So I said to Jordan, we're not trying to feel zen. We're actually just interrupting the stress loop before it becomes your baseline. And what surprised him was how quickly it started helping, because these tiny interruptions stopped the day from feeling like one big long sprint. Then next what I did was stabilize your energy, because your brain needs fuel. So the next piece was very practical. So under stress, Jordan was skipping meals, grabbing coffees, multiple coffees, eating whatever was the quickest available, and then wondering why his brain felt shaky and irritable. So what we did was we made it boring and consistent. So I got him to eat at roughly the same times, including protein with every meal that is specifically for a person's body weight. Each person's different. Mind you, 30 grams for women is significant. If you can, depending on the, women and male size, it really just depends. Men can have a much bigger. It's usually 1.2 grams per body weight. So if you want to figure that out. And then I got him to stop letting hunger build at the point where everything feels harder than it needs to. So I framed it like this. I said, if you want a stable mood and stable decisions, you need stable input. Not perfect, just stable. So remember, boring and consistent creates that stability for mood and also effects on decision making. Next, what we did was we created some movement that helps, not movement that drains, movement that energizes. We looked at exercise because a lot of high performance use training as their stress outlet. But sometimes training becomes another stressor, especially if you are already running on empty, running on adrenaline. So we had to adjust it. We kept movement in, but we chose the kind that left Jordan feeling clearer afterwards and not depleted. And we treated that as the benchmark. Do you feel more regulated after this or more wide? So that's something you could ask yourself if you are moving and exercising. And that is a whole approach that looks at the entire picture rather than just one particular outcome. The next thing is a simple nighttime routine that acts as a buffer. And this was Jordan's biggest complaint, as he was wide and tired in the evenings and also feeling that during the day. So we created a simple buffer between the day and sleep. And Jordan chose a warm shower, 5 minutes of journaling, just enough to get the noise out of the head. And I call this a mind dump at the end of the day. And then low stimulation for the last hour. So no scrolling, no emails, less thinking about tomorrow. Nothing dramatic, just a clear signal to the system of we're done. And here's the part I want you to hear. Within a few weeks, Jordan told me mornings felt clearer. He wasn't snapping it as much. Decisions felt easier. And his team noticed a big difference in how he was communicating, but also the team itself was communicating. Not because he became a new person, but because the nervous system stopped running the business like it was an emergency, like he was trying to put out fires constantly. All right, so I want to give you something that you can actually try and start doing today. Not a full lifestyle overhaul, not a new routine that lasts 3 days and then collapses the moment your work gets busy. Just a simple 7-day experiment. I just want you to play with this for, the next 7 days. For the next week, I want you to do two things. First, add 3 micro resets into your day, and they're just 1 minute each. That's it. Remember that. Pick 3 moments that already exist in your routine, like maybe before you start going to work or you start work, mid morning or mid afternoon, or even before you walk into a meeting. That could be a micro minute. And then what I want you to do for 60 seconds is 60 seconds of belly breathing in through the nose and exhaling out through the mouth. And I want you to relax your jaw and shoulders. Soften your gaze, and then if you can, step outside and just get some fresh air and sunlight just for 60 seconds. You're not trying to feel calm forever. What you're doing is you're just simply interrupting the stress loop. Okay, second thing I want you to do is choose a nighttime buffering habit, just one, something that tells your nervous system, we're done now. It could be as simple as a warm shower or a bath. It could be 5 minutes of journaling. It could be some gentle stretching. It could be some soothing music. Whatever it is for you, just one thing. And also no screens for at least 15 minutes. If you can work up to 1 hour before bedtime, that is ideal. Now, here's the key part. I want you to keep track of your leadership signals, because that's where you're actually going to notice the biggest change. So over the next 7 days, pay attention to how patient you feel, how clear your thinking is, how reactive you are, how you're communicating under pressure, and how easy your decisions feel. And if you notice even a small shift, I want you to celebrate it and take it seriously, because it's not proof that you need to try harder. It's proof that your nervous system baseline is driving your leadership more than you realize. Chronic stress is not a personal failure. It is a physiological state that changes the brain systems responsible for clarity, patience, emotional regulation, and leadership decisions. The encouraging part is that your system is often more responsive than you think once you reduce pressure and rebuild recovery in small, consistent ways. If this episode helped you, follow the Think Tank podcast and share it with a business owner who is carrying too much in silence. I'm Maria Van Buklis. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.